I was staring at my monitor in the Los Angeles office when the announcement came through. Madison Hartley, a 22-year-old marketing intern who had joined our firm just 10 weeks earlier, had been awarded the quarterly performance bonus. My quarterly bonus. $72,000 that I had already mentally earmarked for paying off the last of my student debt and maybe finally replacing the 2009 Honda I'd been driving since grad school. The conference room grew quiet as the regional director, Philip Brandt, praised Madison for her unmatched creativity and promise as a future leader. I sat frozen, watching her accept the recognition with wide-eyed surprise. She seemed sincerely confused, grateful, but not gloating. None of us knew what was going on. Except Philip. I had been with this advertising consultancy for over 5 years. 5 years of delivering last-minute pitches, salvaging accounts no one else could fix, and consistently ranking among the top 3 performers nationwide. Just this quarter alone, I'd secured 5 new corporate campaigns, each valued at more than Madison's yearly salary. According to policy, anyone exceeding their annual benchmarks by over 30% automatically qualified for the bonus. I'd hit 64%. But I sat there, swallowing my disbelief, as Philip made it sound like the award was about forward-thinking leadership and nurturing new talent. It wasn't even about the money, though $72,000 would have changed things. It was the sense of betrayal. How prepared Philip was with his remarks. How the whole thing had been spun to look like strategy, not favoritism. After the meeting, I lingered outside the elevator. Madison approached, eyes full of empathy. "Lauren, I had no idea. I feel awful. You've helped me so much these past weeks." She meant it. I could see it in the way she nervously fidgeted with the strap of her bag. She didn't know she was being used as a pawn. She was just a young woman from Huntington, Indiana, trying to make it in a cutthroat industry. "You deserve the recognition, Madison," I said. And I meant it, more than she could understand in that moment. That evening, I called my brother Nate. I rarely call anyone after work anymore, but I needed a voice that would ground me. "They handed my bonus to the intern," I told him, staring out over the glowing grid of downtown LA. "What? That's outrageous." "HR?" he asked. "It's more tangled than that," I said softly. "And I think I know why." Madison had once mentioned that she grew up a few houses down from Philip's sister. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now? It didn't feel like a coincidence. Favoritism in corporate America doesn't always wear a name tag. And this time, I wasn't going to ignore it. "I think I know why this happened." During my first week mentoring Madison, she mentioned growing up in Huntington, Indiana. Population, just under 9,000. It stuck with me. It wasn't just a small town, it was the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. 2 weeks ago, I overheard Philip on a call in the hallway outside the break room. He was confirming plans to fly home for his mom's birthday. "Back to Huntington again," he said, chuckling. "Mom still insists on cake from Rena's Bakery." Rena's Bakery. Madison had mentioned it when we grabbed lunch the week before. "Best carrot cake in the state," she'd said. That's when the dots started connecting. From then on, I noticed more. Philip and Madison had a rapport that went beyond standard intern-mentor dynamics. They joked about teachers from the local high school, laughed about the same weird statue in the middle of town square, and even shared stories about a 4th of July parade they'd both attended years ago. So when Madison said her family had been close with the Brandts, I wasn't surprised. Philip's family. This bonus wasn't about exceeding targets or innovative ideas. It was about protecting legacy, repackaged as promoting potential. That's when everything shifted. Before I take you deeper into what happened next, let me ask, where are you listening from? I want to know how far this story travels. Leave a comment below if you've ever worked hard only to see someone else rewarded for who they knew instead of what they did. And if that hits home, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because what I did next, you've probably never heard anything quite like it. Once you spot favoritism, it changes everything. Every email becomes a clue. Every comment feels loaded. You notice which projects go to whom, and which questions never get asked. I began observing Philip and Madison more closely. She was given the smoothest clients, the ones who barely needed hand-holding. Her work was praised in meetings even when others had introduced the same ideas earlier. Complex technical challenges somehow never landed on her desk. She was being positioned to thrive, with none of the stress the rest of us carried. But Philip didn't anticipate one thing. I don't blow up. I don't send furious emails. I don't stage dramatic HR walk-ins. My revenge usually starts with kindness. If you found strength in this story, go ahead and subscribe, because the next one might just be the reminder you didn't know you needed. That Monday, I sat on the edge of Madison's desk. I've been thinking about your development, I told her. You've got real potential. Honestly, I think it's time you take on some advanced responsibilities. Her eyes lit up. Really, Lauren? That means so much. You're the sharpest person on this floor. And just like that, I began what I called Madison's accelerated training program. I gave her my playbook, client management strategies I'd honed for years, decision trees I'd built from scratch, complex frameworks that even mid-level associates avoided. She took it all in, eager to prove herself. But I wasn't setting her up to fail. I was setting her up to see. I taught Madison how to map out full project timelines, how to account for scope drift, shifting stakeholder input, and the domino effects of vendor delays. We covered the relationship dynamics inside our most complex client accounts, who actually held decision-making power, who was passive-aggressive, who responded best to direct versus diplomatic approaches. Then I moved her into advanced negotiation tactics. These weren't things you pick up in a training binder. These were strategies built through years of late-night calls, post-mortem meetings, and fragile partnerships that had nearly collapsed. Madison soaked it in, scribbling pages of notes, her eyes wide with determination. She had real talent, I'll never deny that. With proper mentorship, she might have become an outstanding consultant in a few years. But that wasn't what was happening. Philip had already decided she was ready now, not because of her performance, but because she reminded him of home. So I began nudging her into deeper waters. When a major client requested leadership on a systems migration rollout, I suggested Madison could take the reins. She's got the insight and adaptability for it, I told Philip, smiling. When the executive board needed a presenter for our quarterly trend analysis, I said Madison offered a fresh, data-driven voice. Philip loved the idea. He approved every recommendation, never asking whether she was prepared. He was too invested in her success to think critically about the weight she was being asked to carry. While Madison took on more, I started shifting my own behavior too. For 5 years, I had been the reliable one. I was the one who stayed late, picked up weekend calls, and fixed broken deliverables without being asked. I'd worked through family birthdays, anniversaries, and flu seasons. I'd become so dependable they stopped seeing the extra effort as extra at all. So I stopped. I began leaving the office at exactly 5:30 p.m. sharp. When emails came in Saturday afternoon, I replied Monday morning with a courteous, "Apologies, I was offline for the weekend." If a colleague asked me to pick up a last-minute deliverable, I politely explained that my bandwidth was already full this week. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I wasn't trying to sabotage anyone. I was simply doing what every balanced employee should be allowed to do. Maintain professional boundaries. And the cracks started showing almost immediately. Client requests that I used to handle quietly went unanswered for days. Troubleshooting issues that I normally resolved in an hour now lingered into the following week. Project timelines that had once flowed like clockwork suddenly wobbled with delays. The well-oiled machine wasn't malfunctioning, it was simply adjusting to the absence of someone who had been holding it together without recognition for far too long. And no one, not Philip, not even Madison, had been prepared for what that shift would reveal. The flawless operation everyone took for granted began to show its cracks. At the same time Madison was learning just how wide the gap was between theory and real-world execution. The techniques I'd taught her were solid. But they required something she didn't have: context, history, relationship equity. The projects she'd been handed weren't designed for beginners. They demanded intuition born from years of client calls, project pivots, and subtle reads on executive expectations. Madison's confidence began to buckle under the weight. In meetings, she could present the concepts I'd trained her on. But when executives threw curveballs, she froze. When data didn't fit the expected mold, she struggled to adjust the framework. She understood the what, but not yet the why, and that made all the difference. I didn't interfere. I watched from a respectful distance. When she came to me looking stressed, I offered kind encouragement. When she asked for specific guidance, I reminded her that part of rising in this field is learning how to navigate ambiguity without a map. You've got this, Madison, I told her with genuine warmth. Trust your instincts. You're more capable than you know. Meanwhile, Philip was starting to sweat. The minor hiccups were turning into bigger messes. Projects missed key milestones. Clients who had once praised our responsiveness began asking why their emails were going unanswered. Presentations felt shaky, vague, and off rhythm. The division's once bulletproof reputation began to fray at the seams. By the third week, Philip found me in the hallway after lunch. His voice was tight but polite. Lauren, I've noticed you've been maintaining a better work-life balance lately, which, to be clear, I support, he said carefully. But we've hit a few snags, and your expertise could make a big difference right now. He listed the issues, each one a fire I would have put out without question 6 months ago. The kind of high-pressure fixes that had made me their invisible safety net for years. They do sound challenging, I said calmly. But I'm confident the team will find strong solutions. Madison's been doing impressive work, hasn't she? Philip's jaw tensed. She's learning. But this calls for deeper experience. I understand, I nodded. Unfortunately, I'm fully committed to my current deliverables. Maybe external consultants could help with bandwidth. We both knew what that meant. Hiring outside help would cost the company triple my salary, for work I used to do on nights and weekends. That same afternoon, I saw a familiar name pop up on my phone. Diana Westfield from Apex Strategic Solutions. She'd been contacting me for months about a senior consultant role, and I'd always brushed her off in favor of the comfort of what I knew. But this time, I picked up. Something in me had shifted. Lauren, she said warmly, I've got a position that matches your skills perfectly. If you're open, we can move fast. And just like that, I knew the door was finally open. And I was ready to walk through it. This time, I truly listened to Diana's offer. The base salary was 40% higher than what I currently earned. The bonus system was crystal clear, rooted in performance metrics, not politics. No hidden agendas. No vague language about potential or intangibles. The company's culture emphasized mentorship, autonomy, and actual work-life balance, not just lip service. Most importantly, Apex Strategic Solutions specialized in exactly the kind of high-stakes analytical consulting work I found both challenging and deeply rewarding. I'm very interested, I told Diana. How quickly can we move forward? Lauren, we could have you in for interviews this week, she said without missing a beat. I've been hoping to bring you on board for months. I'll expedite everything. I scheduled 2 interviews for Thursday and Friday, finally putting those unused personal days to good use. What followed exceeded every expectation I had. The firm's environment was exactly what I'd spent years wishing my current company would grow into: collaborative, efficient, forward-thinking. The people I met respected each other's time and expertise. There were no office politics to navigate, just professionals solving real problems. By Friday afternoon, the offer came through. A $20,000 signing bonus. A 60% salary increase. And equity options that, if things went well, could far exceed even the generous paycheck. I asked for the weekend to consider it, though my decision was already made. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a calm focus I hadn't felt in months. In my bag was a neatly folded resignation letter. I had rehearsed this moment in my head a dozen times. What I hadn't predicted was that Philip would intercept me at my desk before I could even sit down. Lauren, we need to talk, he said, clearly flustered. We've received a few client complaints recently. I think we need to reevaluate some of the assignments we made. He couldn't say it outright, but I knew what he meant. Madison wasn't holding it together. His gamble had backfired. And now he needed me to clean it up, for free, without credit, and with a smile. But I had other plans. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, I said evenly. This conversation actually comes at a perfect time. I reached into my bag and handed him the envelope I'd been carrying all morning. This is my formal resignation. I'll be transitioning to a new opportunity. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. The blood drained from Philip's face as he read the letter. Lauren, this timing is really tough, he said, stumbling over his words. Can we talk about what it would take to keep you? Salary? Promotion? Something long-term. I gave him a small, sincere smile. I'm grateful for everything I've learned here, Philip. But this isn't about compensation anymore. He stared at me like he'd just realized how much he'd lost, only too late to do anything about it. And I walked away, knowing my value wouldn't be ignored again. This decision isn't about dissatisfaction, I told Philip gently. Sometimes, new challenges just align perfectly with your professional goals. He opened the letter on the spot, scanning it with increasing concern. You're giving the exact minimum notice, he said, lifting his eyes. And this is our busiest quarter. Is there any flexibility with your start date? Unfortunately, no, I replied. They need someone immediately for a time-sensitive implementation that fits my background exactly. And that was completely true. Apex Strategic Solutions had a global software rollout beginning in 3 weeks that required deep knowledge of enterprise logistics systems, the very systems I had built my reputation on. Diana had nearly shouted with excitement when I accepted the role so quickly. Philip stood still, clearly doing mental math. He didn't like the answer. Finding a replacement with my technical skills and client history would take months. Even then, it was unlikely they'd find someone willing to take on that kind of workload at the salary I'd been earning. Most importantly, I saw it click in his eyes. His decision to hand my $72,000 bonus to Madison had created the perfect storm. That move had pushed me out. And now, the loss of my presence was threatening his entire department's performance. Lauren, he said, lowering his voice, I want to be completely transparent with you. There may have been some miscommunication about the quarterly bonus allocation. I'd like to revisit that, and make sure you're recognized properly. I gave him a small, honest smile. Philip, I appreciate that. I really do. But my decision isn't about the bonus. I paused for just a second. Madison absolutely deserved that recognition, and I'm glad she received it. That moment, the one I'd quietly waited for, had arrived. He finally realized that trying to fix the money wouldn't fix the message it had sent. That loyalty, excellence, and consistency were somehow invisible. That no one notices the foundation until it starts to crack. Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected timing, I added. And I'm genuinely grateful things unfolded the way they did. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched the consequences unfold like a slow-moving symphony. On my third-to-last day, Madison stopped by my desk. Her posture slouched, her eyes were tired. Lauren, she said softly, can I ask you something honestly? Of course. When you started teaching me those advanced strategies, did you know this would happen? I looked at her, this bright young woman who'd been thrown into deep water too soon. She'd grown over the past month. Stumbled, yes. But grown. She had learned her limits, and, more importantly, how to recognize them. I knew you were smart enough to take on complex challenges, I said honestly. But I also knew that you'd have to figure out your own way through them. She nodded slowly. I think I understand now. It's not just about having the techniques. It's about knowing when and how to use them. That only comes from time and experience. Exactly. And now you're building that experience much faster than you would have otherwise, I told her gently. Madison had learned more in 4 weeks than she probably would have absorbed in 6 months of gradual onboarding. It had been intense, even overwhelming, but the pressure had peeled back the surface and shown her what truly mattered. The actual skills, the gaps, and the growth she still needed to face. I'm going to ask Philip to adjust my responsibilities, she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I think I was promoted too fast. I want to make sure I'm really ready before I take on anything that complex again. I felt genuine pride rise in my chest. She was no longer the eager intern soaking up techniques like a sponge. She had become a young professional who understood the stakes, and was learning to calibrate her ambition with self-awareness. That sounds like excellent judgment, I said. It's the kind of insight that separates a strong consultant from a short-lived one. Meanwhile, the impact of my exit had become impossible to ignore. The client who had been waiting for their enterprise integration had threatened to cancel the contract altogether unless they received a resolution within 72 hours. The quarterly executive presentation, once delegated to Madison, had already been postponed twice. No one else could pull together the analytics, performance metrics, and trend modeling in time. And then something interesting happened. 3 other senior consultants scheduled one-on-ones with Philip. Quiet, loyal team members who'd always put their heads down and worked were now asking questions. About workload, about pay equity, about why they were doing director-level work at coordinator-level salaries. My departure had done more than create a gap. It had sparked introspection. It forced Philip to face the reality that when you overlook your most dedicated people, you don't just lose one, you risk losing many. On my final Friday, Philip knocked on my door. "Lauren," he said, voice low. "I just want you to know I recognize the mistakes I made. The bonus decision, it wasn't handled right. You should have been recognized, and I let something personal influence a professional call. I appreciated the honesty more than I expected to. I respect you for saying that," I told him. "These decisions aren't easy, and I know you've had a lot on your plate." "Is there anything I can do to change your mind?" he asked. "A counteroffer maybe? Expanded responsibilities? Or a formal commitment to fixing our recognition process?" I paused before answering. Philip wasn't just trying to fix a number on a paycheck. He was grappling with the fallout of building a system on favoritism instead of fairness. "I think this transition is the best thing for everyone," I said at last. "You'll have a chance to build something stronger. Madison will grow at the right pace. And I'll be doing work that genuinely excites me." "Where are you going?" he asked. "Apex Strategic Solutions," I replied. "They specialize in exactly the kind of technical consulting I've always loved." Philip's expression shifted, part admiration, part regret. "They are our biggest competitor in the enterprise consulting space," he said quietly. "You'll be working on the exact types of projects you've always excelled at here." I nodded. That's exactly why I said yes. What Philip didn't know was that Diana hadn't just found my resume on a database. She had been targeting me specifically for over a year. Apex had been losing enterprise bids to our firm, and more than once, they'd learned it wasn't just the company's name that sealed the deal. It was mine. Clients wanted me on their projects. Now, those same client relationships would follow me, naturally, quietly. No sabotage. No recruiting emails. Just the organic shift that happens when people trust you, not just the logo on your business card. The irony wasn't lost on me. Philip's decision to redirect my $72,000 bonus to Madison had triggered a chain of events that would ultimately cost his firm millions more, in lost business and diminished reputation. And that was something no high-potential intern could fix overnight. On my final day, Madison organized a small farewell gathering. There were donuts, cards, and more kind words than I expected. Even Philip stood to speak. "Lauren has been the backbone of this department," he said to the group. "Her dedication, professionalism, and mentorship have shaped nearly every success we've had over the past 5 years." I glanced around the room at the familiar faces. Colleagues who'd become friends. Madison, who had grown more than she probably realized. And Philip, now visibly aware of what his choices had truly cost. "Thank you all," I said sincerely. "This has been one of the most meaningful chapters of my career. I'm excited to see how you all continue growing and pushing the boundaries of what's possible." 3 months later, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from Madison. She'd just been promoted to a senior consultant role, this time with proper preparation and mentorship. She'd even been featured in the company newsletter for launching an innovative client training initiative. "I wanted to thank you," she wrote. "You pushed me harder than I thought I could handle. And now I see why. I learned more in 4 weeks than I would have in a year of soft onboarding. I hope we can work together again someday." Shortly after, I heard from Philip too. He asked whether I'd be open to consulting on a few complex projects where our expertise might align. His department had stabilized, but not without change. They'd overhauled their recognition and promotion policies, salaries were reviewed. Contributions were finally visible again. As for me, Apex Strategic Solutions exceeded every hope I'd had. The projects were demanding. And the compensation aligned with my value. But more importantly, I'd learned something priceless. 4 years, I had tied my worth to being the go-to person. The one who never said no. The bonus incident reminded me, being invaluable doesn't mean being invisible. And that was worth far more than $72,000. The revenge was never about destroying anyone or seeking to humiliate them. It wasn't about dramatic takedowns or grand gestures. It was about walking away from a place that had stopped seeing my worth, and allowing the natural consequences of that blindness to unfold on their own. Philip learned that favoritism doesn't just damage morale. It creates an unstable foundation that top performers refuse to stand on. Quietly, without confrontation, I had shown him exactly what happens when reliability is mistaken for permanence. Madison learned something too. She learned to pause, to evaluate her readiness before stepping into responsibility that demands more than ambition. She learned that success isn't about being given a title. It's about knowing what to do when everything gets hard. The department itself had a lesson to carry forward. They restructured their entire compensation and advancement framework to emphasize measurable contributions over personal connections. Performance evaluations became more transparent. Promotions were no longer quietly handed out behind closed doors. The culture began shifting. Not because I demanded it, but because my absence revealed what my presence had quietly held together. And me? I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when faced with unfairness is to simply stop enabling it. Not out of spite. Not out of bitterness. But because staying in a space that overlooks your value sends a message that you agree. The $72,000 bonus that sparked all of this turned out to be the cheapest wake-up call Philip's team ever received. In losing me, they gained clarity. And in leaving, I found something far more valuable than money. I found proof that my value never depended on someone else recognizing it. It was always there. And honestly, watching the situation unfold exactly as I had anticipated was more validating than I could have imagined. If you've ever been passed over, undervalued, or told you should just be grateful to have a job, I hope you'll leave a comment and share your story. Because your experience matters. We need to hear each other's stories. Not just for validation, but for understanding, for strength, for change. And if you want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. Your worth isn't tied to how loudly you fight. It's tied to how clearly you see your value. And how unapologetically you protect it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for understanding, and for witnessing my story. I shared it because I know there are people out there, maybe you, who felt the same sting.